pilots and squad leaders make up the core of the TCR Marines, and having a good loadout is very much the difference between rolling through your enemies without any difficulty and taking heavy losses and ultimately suffering defeat. So, in this video, I'm going to start out with a tier list ranking all of the squad leaders and pilots currently in the early access. Oh, sorry, squad leaders and pilots, not pirates. Pirates are the things that you shoot at. This is going to be based on my experiences, and while it might not be a perfect objective metric, it's largely based on the characters that I have found success with personally. And then after that, I'm going to go over a few of my favorite loadouts for the characters that I've used the most. And so, without further ado, let's get into things. Alright, so first up we have Charles Lim. Now, there are a couple ways to play him. One that I like is as a jump-heavy infantry, so I give him the pirate jumpsuit, he gets close to stuff, and he blasts it. Plus he has counterattack perks, so first thing that attacks him usually dies. He has good defensive perks like Zigzag, which procs when he jumps in, gives him really nice defenses. He can also do a very similar thing in a troop carrier. So, I'm going to put him in A tier, because I think he's great. Next up we have Gabriel Excandi, whose name I'm probably mispronouncing, and I apologize. He's sort of the pilot equivalent of Pike, being very support-focused, though that doesn't mean he can't deal out some damage in his own right. As such, I'm going to put him in B, because pilots tend to be a bit more expensive on the supply side. I think he's a good unit, but I also think that there are other pilots you're probably going to be bringing ahead of him. And speaking of pilots, Ivory, who I really wanted to like. On my first save file, she was my main pilot for a bit. And I've got to put her in C tier. Next we have Jacques. I like the fact that you can use heavy armor on him very easily, because one of his perks reduces the supply cost for armor. And his special passive, that gives him a stack of a buff, at 4 you get extra AP, is really cool. And for those things, I'd be tempted to put him up here. The problem is, as I played on higher difficulties, I found it's a little bit too easy for enemies to lock him down. There's sort of his tank playstyle where you can taunt with stuff, and then enemies will attack you and it builds up your passive. The problem is, a lot of the time, even if he survives it, which is not always going to be the case with menace units, they hit very hard even in like breaching armor, he'll be locked down, and so he won't get a turn. And yeah, it's a little weird. I think with a couple of different perks or changes to game mechanics and how they affect him, he could be incredible, but for now, I'm going to put him in B. On the other hand, here we have Jane Darby, the stealth assassin, who's going in S tier, because she is the strongest squad leader in the game, and I don't think that's a super controversial statement. Her starting stats are incredibly high. Yes, she has a high supply cost, but she has excellent damage perks, she can negate enemy cover, and she's stealthy, so after she kills something, enemies can't even see her, and she gets to kill another thing for free. That said, right now I'm making this tier list during early access. It's entirely possible that Jane Darby will get a nerf. In fact, I would be genuinely surprised if she didn't get a nerf, because she's just that strong. She practically deserves to be in a tier of her own. Jean Sai, a character that I will admit I have not used as much as I would like. I think she's pretty strong in the early game, but she seems to fall off late. Now, maybe I've used her wrong. That is entirely possible. In my experience so far, I think either bottom of B or top of C. You know what? I'm going to go top of C, because I think her early game's good, but I don't think she quite beats out some of the other characters that I've put in B so far. JG Wetteroth, whose name is kind of funny to me, and D tier. Again, it could be that I've been using him wrong, but he feels like the only squad leader who is outright bad at the moment. His supply cost, it's not super high, but it's not as efficient as some of the other characters. Yeah, he has a cool perk against big alien bugs, but if you shoot them with a big cannon, they die just as easily. And so yeah, I don't think he's that great. He did have a fun gimmick where his knife perk could be used as a free perk and you could unspec it and still use it. That's gone now. And so, yeah, D tier. Okay, next up we have Marta Carta, who, a lot like Lim, is pretty versatile. She has terrible base stats when you first get her. Like, it is a struggle to use her on higher difficulties because her base stats are so bad. She also has the highest growth rate in the game, so her stats do get fixed over time. And because of that, I think I'm going to put her in A tier, because she's been a very strong unit after I took the time to fix her base stats. There's a couple ways I like to play her, one of which is the Get in the Robot version, where she hops in a troop carrier, the troop carrier ferries her to a location, and then she hops out. The other is as my ATGM carrier, where someone else will mark, or she'll just use the direct fire mode. Then she rains down hell, and she gets a lot of extra uses from the extra squad members that she has. So this A tier also has a lot of other ways to play her. She's one of the more versatile characters in the game. And by the way, if you're enjoying the tier list so far, or you just really like watching stuff that makes you angry, well, do be sure to get subscribed for more content in the future, whether it's a MENACE tier list or a tier list for a different game. I'm definitely going to be making more. And if you are enjoying it, well, hey, leave a like, because that really helps out with the YouTube algorithm. With that said, let's get back to things by ranking Renu Rewa, who's another pilot, and she has some really unusual perks, one of which is Roadkill. Now, all pilots have the ability to run over enemy units, dealing damage. Roadkill makes this far more damaging, about twice as damaging actually. When you combine this with her Berserk perk, which lowers her accuracy, Berserk is Restore AP, that's also very good, it lets her run over more stuff, but her Rage perk, that lowers her accuracy but increases her damage, she is just a killing monster, which is great, and earns her an S tier, because in addition, she has AP reduction while moving. That plus Berserk gives her tons of AP efficiency. I think Charles Lim is the only other character that has that combination right now. And her inherent perk gives her additional accuracy as she kills enemies. So those accuracy penalties from Rage don't matter long term. Overall, absolutely insane character. Sakin Singh. I think that's how it's pronounced. Maybe it's Sachin Singh? Not sure. But where do I put him? See, I've had some really good runs with him, which make me think he's more towards A tier. But sometimes enemies just blast him, and it's rough, because if a bunch of his squaddies get wiped out, his performance drops. He does have a way to recover them, but oh man, I am very torn between A and B. I would not blame you if you put him in A, if you like him, if you have a lot of success with him. I think I'm going to put him at the very top of B though, just because a few too many times I've struggled because at the wrong time an enemy squad gets off a clean shot, or if it's like one of those fucking menace snipers that will completely annihilate you and it just pops off too many of his units. Okay, the Yaz. I slept on this guy for a bit. Originally, I thought he was worse than Jax, because I was like, well, he has some tanky stuff going on, but then he gets shot at and his units die more, because he can't wear as much heavy armor. But oh my god, he is a damage monster. A little bit less so against the Menace, because you can't shred their morale. But he's one of a few units that can eat away at the morale of, like, the army. Insane damage potential. One of the stronger units, now that I've gotten to using him more. And so, for that, I think he's great, and I think he deserves to stand in A tier with Marta Carta and Charles Lim. Tech. Ooh, okay, so if you had asked me when I was very new to the game and I was playing the demo where Tech goes, I would have said S tier, because he was one of the first units where I was like, ooh, I can use the heavy infantry guns and I can lower the number of squaddies and it just does full damage. Sorry, not infantry guns, infantry specials. Heavy specials, and I can lower the squaddies and it does full damage, and that's insane. Since then I've realized he's not actually that good, unfortunately. Die Hard does make him hard to kill. The community kind of memes that he is the best spotter. He is. He's also pretty good earning around of an RPG, but I gotta put him in C. I'm sorry, Tech. I wish I could love you, but you just gotta be a little bit more Rambo. Achilles. Ooh. Another character where I'm really conflicted, because I think the endgame power of Achilles is up here with like Renu Rewa and a little below Jane Darby. Jane Darby is just a tier of her own, like I said, or at least a class of her own. She's literally an S tier, so she's sharing the tier. But I think I'm going to put him at the top of A, and the reason is because he doesn't have a way to deal with defects. So his whole deal, he gets extra AP the lower health his vehicle is. In addition, he gets extra bonuses for a walker, And he gets shield walls, so only a third of his health can be blown away in an attack, which means he can just tank hits from ATGMs, which is totally insane. Also, he has the highest supply cost in the game. And if you get something like an engine destroyed or weapon system destroyed defect, he becomes completely useless. So with all that, and because he's the only squad leader that, well, the only squad leader that is a pilot that I found is like very feast or very famine, where he can feel totally mediocre one run and absolutely dominate in like solo missions the next, I'm going to go top of A. I think he is very strong, but an acquired taste. All right, Gary Boggenright. This is another character that, like Tech, early on I would have said S tier because I was like, oh look, cheap units. And in the early game, his recycled perk is very good. Being able to jumpstart a mech when it's been EMP'd, also very good. But those are early game things. Late game, I don't think he's as strong, and late game, you have more supply to play with. Maybe I should have done two different tier lists. One early game, where honestly Achilles would be even lower because supply cost is so tough. One late game, where Achilles probably would be an S tier. But either way, this is the tier list. This is what I'm going with. I think Gary has earned a solid B. All right, next up we have Pike, who I'm jokingly tempted to put here just because I think some of his voice lines are really annoying. If there was their voice lines are annoying tier, like down here, he would go in it. But if we're just looking at combat effectiveness, as he loves to talk about, I do think he's earned his place in A because he is a support. He is a damn good support. If you set things up so that you have 3 infantry squads who are able to stick together, i.e. you don't have a Jane Darby who's off soloing a mission by herself, you don't have a tech that's acting as a spotter who's moving up ahead and abusing Die Hard to not die. You have like Charles Lim, Marta Carta, and Pike that can move as a unit, or you have, the Yaz who can move with him as a unit. Insane amount of bonuses. It feels like you're at 100 morale, even if you are not at 100 morale. Or, sorry, 100 authority, even if you're not at 100 authority. Very hard for enemies to break morale. All around, very solid unit. And last but not least, we have Cody Griefinger, who, interestingly enough, has a very similar skill set to the Yaz and also a little bit of an overlap with Jane Darby. I've used him a fair bit. I've gone back and forth on how to build him. I tried doing the whole stealth assassin thing. It's okay. I think abusing morale and like hitting hard, especially on single element things. Like this guy is a surprisingly good tank buster, but I think you're going to ultimately have to put him in B because much like Jacques, overall, good initial impression. As I've played him more, as I've used other characters more, generally I find myself using the Yaz and Charles Lim more often, and I find myself getting better success with those characters. Maybe it's how I've built him. If you have some, Cody Griefinger solos and mission builds, please let me know down below because I'm curious. I've said that a few times now. I'm very interested in how other people are building characters. But with that said, and with Cody placed, this is how I'd rank the characters based on my experiences in both normal and challenging difficulty, trying to take into account how much success I've had with them, how strong I personally feel they are, the number of builds that are available, and also whether they're useful throughout the entire game rather than just being early game focused, like, say, Gene, who feels very early game focused, or purely a late game monster like Achilles. And so next up, I want to talk about some of the loadouts that I use regularly. These might not be mathematically perfect. Honestly, I haven't done the numbers in most cases. What I can tell you is, from subjective experience, they're pretty darn good at blasting enemies on both normal and challenging difficulty. Starting with Jane Darby. So for perks, I technically built her slightly wrong. What do I mean by that? Well, I wanted to get her agility to 100. Why? Because I just want to see the nice even 120 action points. It is a totally pointless thing, and so to do that, I took growth rate, because even though adding growth potential to a character with high base stats does not significantly increase their stats over time, it does make it significantly less time, or at least less missions, to get a stat from like 97 to 100. What I should have done instead is taken it last so that I could just easily respec it and only pay like 65 instead of having to fully respec the character. In terms of how I gear out, Stoneclad Shotgun. Why? Because this deletes stuff at close range. Alternatively, the Kruger Heavy SMG, really good alternative. This is a new weapon that was just added with patch 4. For special, I like the Elsa. Why? It's super long range. It's decent against armor. And then I've been using the low profile protective suit. This is the high armor concealment set. That said, you can use Jaeger fatigues. They offer basically no protection, so if she's shot, she's dead. Luckily, dead enemies don't get to shoot, and this is really cheap in terms of supply costs. Like, it would be minus 270. For items, I rotate things. I do like keeping the camo kit. That's pretty much 100%. Sometimes I will use binoculars for extra vision. Sometimes I'll have armor-piercing ammo. This was because I was specifically assassinating some pirate boarding commandos. In terms of alternatives, being able to throw out a scout bot is pretty good. Smoke grenades, get out of jail free card. These are very, very good. Surprisingly, against the Menace, sometimes a flashbang grenade. And she's a pretty good marker, although her AP is quite valuable, so you don't necessarily want to be using this unless you're marking like a heavy tank. Oh yeah, and I almost forgot to mention red ammo. Very, very good, especially against Menace. Next up we have Rewa, who I have built to run things over. So, Revel and Slaughter is her base passive. She gains accuracy and discipline as she kills stuff. Roadkill makes run over very, very fun, and makes it especially effective against Menace. Fury is a huge amount of base damage. Grind Down is good armor damage, which is helpful against some heavily armored targets, though I think it's a toss-up between Grind Down and Unbreakable. Then there's Drive-By, Berserk. I've been considering going Finisher. I think there's a strong argument to be made for Finisher instead of 2 shreds. But the basic idea here, she's very mobile, she blasts stuff. Fury, totally insane. She loses a little accuracy, but that's okay because of Revel and Slaughter. This can't really miss. These mean she shreds armor. Heavy weapons just annihilate stuff. Berserk means she has even more mobility, especially when combined with Drive-By. I get like 3 attacks per turn so many times. In terms of weapons, I love the KMG auto grenade launcher. After it was buffed, insane weapon. Like, easily my favorite among the light weapons. Among the heavier weapons, I swap it up depending on the mission. Like, the long barrel tank gun, pretty good as a heavy option. The laser lance is a little bit better in my opinion just because it's spammable. Though this thing, it trucks stuff. Like, it will legitimately annihilate things. The auto cannon is also really good, and I personally like the Griffin or the Twin Griffins. This is more of an anti-infantry thing though. If I'm shooting like tanky targets such as Menace, we're going auto cannon or laser lance. If I'm shooting mostly vehicles, laser lance or a long barrel tank gun. Alright, next up, Charles Lim, who is another run and gun character with Berserk, meaning he is very, very mobile. Also, he's easy to promote, so easy to respec. I of course took run and gun here, totally insane as a tier 1. After that I took buff, make him just a little bit tankier. I think mobile infantry, where he hops into a vehicle, gets out, shoots, hops back in. Totally viable. I've been playing him a little bit differently. Then there's point fire zigzag counter-strike. This is because I want him to get attacked and I want to take advantage of the counter-strike. Hence why I'm not keeping him in an infantry vehicle a lot of the time, and Berserk so he kills stuff. So I've been playing him as a boarding commando jetsuit build. His whole job is to jump into combat, shoot the enemies quite a bit, and then get out of there. In terms of loadouts, I've really liked the Kruger on him. Can also use a shotgun, just a close range weapon that's going to kill stuff real good from close range. In addition, rocket propelled grenade. I tend to swap this up depending on what I need. Sometimes I've used the SDMR, sometimes I've used an RPG, sometimes I've used a chain gun or a machine gun. And right now I was using hollow points because I was wrecking under armored pirates. That said, not the best for a lot of engagements. One of my favorites is the match grade ammo, gets him a little bit of extra range. Oh, and if you find yourself jumping into danger and then dying, one way to avoid that is pirate speed, where you can jump into danger, use the pirate speed, and then take another turn to give yourself enough AP to get out. Next up we have Jacques, who I've built as heavy infantry tank. Because of Flamboyant, he can wear super heavy armor. With Fortify, it's even harder for enemies to hit him. He can use Disruptive Fire, so lowering enemy accuracy. Shooting Gallery means if something's out in the open, he will do kind of insane damage to it. And combined that with critical hits, he's got a lot of extra damage stuff. The reason I don't have Point Fire, he kept getting pinned down. The reason I don't have Full Send is I'm often using his infantry weapon, not his special weapon. I think those are totally viable options. Disdain's also a pretty good one, especially if you're using point fire. That way you don't get pinned down as much. You'll probably give up like disruptive fire and stubborn maybe, though stubborn pretty good if you're getting shot at a lot. Probably give up growth potential or new tricks at that point. And honestly, most of his stats are good enough that I probably don't need it, but I wanted to raise his toughness and vitality specifically. You know, he gets shot at a lot, so that was the idea. In terms of weapons, I like battle rifles, so basically think crowbar or some sort of crowbar adjacent weapon. Pretty good at medium and long ranges. Then in addition, I was using him as a sniper. He basically just sits there in his heavy armor. He gets shot. He doesn't take very much damage because he's in very heavy armor. Babash set is surprisingly good at absorbing enemy fire, even from menace foes. And if he gets attacked and doesn't get suppressed, he gets extra AP, which allows him to pressure the enemy thanks to his pressure stacks. Alright, then there's Marta Carta, who is kinda not spec'd the right way right now. Let me explain. Originally, I'd been building her around the mobile infantry perk, where she would get in a tank, hop out, shoot something, and then get back in the tank. As such, I was using solid grouping because I was shooting the same target twice. I have now built her out more for an anti-vehicle role, so realistically, this should be gone. Athletic is not super important either. Instead, it would be like Scout, Share the Load, Tank Buster, Team Spirit, then backtrack for Full Send, Steady Gun, Bags and Belts. Last perk, do whatever you want. You could do Mobile Infantry, Athletic, Stubborn. The whole idea here is she carries an ASGM, and this is going to kill most vehicles in the game in one hit. It will kill heavy tanks in 2 hits. She has a pipe gun because she is not using her infantry weapon. She is also carrying an ammo bag. This means even more uses for the ATGM. Combine this with someone who can mark. As a note, with call out target, she can mark. This is a totally viable option. Costs 40 AP as long as she's set up. She can fire the ATGM in the same turn. And you just blast stuff. Also, if you want, you can set up Tech as a spotter squad. How you do that is you'd spec him out, you'd take Die Hard here, give him like a couple of dudes, you'd give him heavy enough armor that he's likely to survive, maybe even like a jumpsuit. Give him pretty much any suppressive weapon. That way, if he gets attacked, he can suppress stuff. And of course, give him a target designator, pipe gun because he's not really going to be shooting stuff. And yeah, send him in. Ideally, you'd want to get his defense up, though, so it's not negative. And ideally, you'd probably want, like, Determined so he doesn't get locked down. Tech marks the enemy. And then, Marta rains fire from a safe distance using the indirect fire mode. She's also pretty darn good at using the direct fire mode to blast enemies. And yes, initially her stats are terrible, but with some work, she actually ends up being pretty well-rounded. And so those are my thoughts on the various squad leaders and pilots who are currently available in the early access. I'm making this as of early access patch 4. I suspect in the future there's going to be more people to recruit and more build styles supported. After I went over the tier list, I talked about a few of the setups that I use pretty frequently. Now, I do not think those are the only ways to build these characters. Quite the opposite. I'm pretty sure there's a lot of different ways to build these characters, some of which might even be better than what I used. So, if there's any loadout that you want to share, please do so down below. Also, if you want to see more of my thoughts on the game, such as some tips and tricks that I've picked up along the way, or how to beat certain enemies, I'll link both of those guides up in the card and down below. Remember, if you enjoyed the video, do be sure to leave a like, it really helps out the YouTube algorithm, and get subscribed if you want to see more content, whether it's for Menace or a different game that I feel like playing. For now, thank you very much for watching to the end. I'm glad you've enjoyed, good luck on your missions, and I'll see you in the next one.